Well, actually, sir, that honor goes to someone very near and dear to us as citizens of the UK.
Yes.
The London Daily Telegraph has the honor of the next question.
Yes.
The representative from that publication is Mr. Thomas Forsyth, who is, by the way, of
the Uppington Forsyth? Oh, right.
So, Mr. Forsyth, do you kindly address your question?
So, it will be a pleasure to hear a crisp British accent after spending all this time in America.
Thomas Forsyth, the London Daily Telegraph. I apologize for my lack of accent, but may I compliment you on your amazing story and your equally amazing feat of winning not one, not two, but 3 corrections from the New York Times.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Forsyth, before we get to your question, sir, make one point perfectly clear to you, however. If there's any overacting to be done here, I will do it.
Quickly to my question.
Yes.
Having seen the destruction of your ship,
Yes, sir.
you are now essentially marooned on a floating piece of ice. How did you calculate your position, and how did you establish the priorities that you would need to address? Thank you, Mr. Forsyth.
Excellent question. Frank Worsley, who was the captain of the Endurance, and who in my mind is the premier navigational talent in all the world, was responsible for taking daily readings via mercury chronometer and sextant. According to Wuzzles, Wuzzles was the affectionate nickname given to Captain Worsley by the affectionate members of his crew. According to Wuzzles and his trusted sextant, we were some 800 miles from the nearest land mass and some 1,200 miles from the nearest civilized outpost. Wuzzles also informed me that the ice floe that we were now inhabiting was slowly traveling north. It was that bit of information that most informed our strategy. And strategy, according to Captain Scott, is the careful articulation of all available resources. Therefore, we would allow the ice floe to continue carrying us north until it became logical to launch the 3 lifeboats salvaged from the wreckage of the Endurance. We would launch those boats to one of 3 locations depending upon our final position, either Graham's Land, Deception Island, or the South Shetland Islands, Elephant or Clarence Island. From one of those locations, we would kit out the largest of the 3 boats, the James Caird, the 22-foot whaler, for the 850-mile, 17-day journey across the Drake Passage, the most destructive and dangerous body of water in the world. If we were actually successful in navigating the Drake Passage, we would land at South Georgia Island. However, we would be forced to land on the southern part of the island, the uninhabited side. We would then have to cross a 2,000-foot sheer drop ice glacier in order to reach the inhabited side of the island, the whaling station at Grytviken, where we would simply knock on the door of the manager's station and ask for help. It was all quite impossible, but there you are. As far as prioritizing our actions, our first priority was to establish a working camp upon the ice. We called it Ocean Camp, but because pack ice can split and crack at a moment's notice, it was necessary to make the camp mobile as well as functional. So we kept the 3 lifeboats chock-up, full of all those items necessary for our survival and for our journey home. Tents and clothing for warmth and protection against the elements. Food, naturally, for sustenance. Our medical instruments and surgical supplies, and also our navigational charts and instruments. Everything else was left behind in a pile on the ice. Each man was permitted only 2 pounds of personal possessions, and that had to include his shaving kit and his tobacco. Everything else left behind in a pile on the ice. Mr. McCarthy here was permitted to hang on to his precious Tennyson, as was Mr. Hussey his banjo, etc., but those items were critical for our morale. Only those items critical for our survival, our journey home, and our morale were held on to. Everything else behind in a pile on the ice. My contributions to that pile included more than 20 gold sovereigns, my gold watch, and the Bible given me by Queen Alexandra on the day of our departure. Still, of all the items salvaged from the wreckage of the Endurance, it was the attitude of the men, more than any other thing salvaged, that helped us to survive. When you are staring into the face of impending doom, when the mouth of hell bares her teeth, optimism is true moral courage. Have I answered your question to the satisfaction of your universe?
Very well, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for not overacting again. Mr. McCarthy, who has the next question of this process this morning?
The next question comes from the reporter representing the Miami Herald, Mr. George Powell. Mr. Powell, would you kindly stand and address the service?
Good morning, Mr. Powell. What is your question, sir?
Sir, speaking of morale,
Yes.
how do the men stay busy during the 5 months of restraint on the ice? And what are their recreational activities?
Each of the men had, as you can well imagine, specific duties in order to keep the camp both functional and at the ready. However, we rotated duties so that each man was fully versed in all areas of camp function. Once we had completed the rotation 3 times, each man was permitted to gravitate to that area of camp service which best suited his gifts. That way, every single day, each man occupied a place of significance on his team and was permitted the opportunity to deliver excellence to that team. The men may have come from different walks of life, but they were unified by those 2 very strong and powerful concepts. Place of significance on their team, the opportunity to deliver excellence. As far as recreation is concerned, well, we had almost daily football matches, albeit on a very chilly pitch. We had dog sledge races. We had evening theatricals, sing songs. We had a hair cutting tournament. We had Bible study, card games, mock trials. We had formal dinners. All of those activities were critical for morale and most critical in preparing for the polar night. In all the world, there's nothing quite so desolate as the polar winter. I wonder if you can imagine what it's like to go day after day, week after week, month after month, without the sun. It literally is a return to the Ice Age. No light, no movement, no warmth, no life. Few men, unaccustomed to its effects, can ward off those effects entirely. It has driven some men quite mad indeed. Mr. McCarthy, what was your favorite recreational activity while stranded on the ice in Ocean Camp?
Well, boss, as you probably recall, I was always rather partial to the aggressive cussing and creative profanity.
Of course you were. Permit me to explain, Mr. Powell and friends. There were certain conditions surrounding life in Ocean Camp which the men found to be quite intolerable at times. And whatever was the most annoying condition of the day, whether it be the perpetual cold, Mr. Powell, the ice blindness, the constant blizzards, the rather routine diet, blubber smoke, penguin guano, whatever was the most annoying condition of the day, that condition was then liberally lambasted at the evening campfire. And since there were no lovely ladies such as these to offend with their language tended to become rather descriptive. Let's move on, Mr. McCarthy.
Actually, Sir Ernest is much too modest to tell you this himself, but he's rather gifted at that particular endeavor himself. I can remember one night in particular, we were discussing the penguin guano.
Moving on.
And Sir Ernest came up with 4 different creative ways to put that guano back whence it had come.
McCarthy!
No point in dwelling on it, sir. I think we probably should move on.
Thank you, let's do that. Excellent idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaking of morale, can you tell us what circumstances caused the ship's carpenter, Chippy McNesh, to refuse a direct order from Captain Worsley? And did that short-lived mutiny have an adverse effect on your crew?
Thank you, Miss Adams.